Well, every so often, we love having her on. Representative Harriet Hageman joins us from Washington, D.C. Is that where you are this morning, Representative? Where are you today?
I am in Washington, D.C. I returned yesterday afternoon,
Okay.
and we'll be in session today.
Okay, great. The big story today is about tariffs. I was wondering if you could give me some insight into why tariffs with China, Canada, Mexico. What is President Trump trying to do? What is the plan, and where do you see it going?
Well, I think it's pretty easy to see where it's going, and that is that he is forcing them to change what they've been doing in terms of, number one, securing the northern and southern borders with regard to Mexico and Canada, and both of them have agreed to step up and do a better job of that, both to stop the invasion of illegal aliens, but also to stop the scourge of the fentanyl coming across our borders. As was indicated in your news program, it's the number one cause of death for those individuals 18 to 35 years old. It's absolutely been devastating on our country. It's killed hundreds of thousands of people. The fentanyl is manufactured in China, and it's distributed by the Mexican drug cartels, and it's also coming across the Canadian border. So I think a lot of people think it was a trade issue. It is about securing the border and making sure they don't allow that poison and the illegals to come across.
I know that he has suspended the tariffs for a month or so for some. But do you think the tariffs will actually go into effect, or do you think Canada and Mexico will come around and everything will be smoothed over?
They already are coming around. Mexico has agreed to place 10,000 troops on the southern border, and Canada has also agreed that they're going to do a better job with 24-hour surveillance of the border and block illegal crossings. So they've already come around. The tariffs have already had the intended effect. Now, whether they will continue to do that, that's a question that we'll have to keep monitoring. But the tariffs have already worked, I guess you'd say.
Yeah, that's for sure, because he's delayed them. Yeah, he's put them off for a month. And like you said, we'll have to wait and see what happens. But yeah, they've certainly come to the table and said, okay, we'll do this and this and this. What worries me, though, is China. China can tell us to go pound sand and, raise their tariffs on certain things that we import. Where do you see that negotiation heading as far as tariffs?
So one of the things that I think is good about tariffs is the possibility and the opportunity to re-domesticate a variety of businesses and manufacturing companies that have left the United States. So I see these things as actually a much broader and a much longer term issue in terms of what we're going to be. We saw during the pandemic, which, by the way, now everybody admits was released from the Wuhan lab. Most of us knew that within a matter of days after this whole thing started in 2020. But we found then that so many of our drugs are manufactured in China. Our hospital equipment is manufactured in China. I am hoping that one of the things that come out of this is that we can convince these companies to re-domesticate. All you have to look at is what we were able to do in terms of gearing up during World War II. We were able to gear up as quickly as we were and ultimately win that war because we had domestic manufacturing. We've lost those jobs over the last 30 to 40 years, and we need to bring them back. And I'm hoping that one of the things that tariffs will do is encourage these companies to come back to America.
My guest is Harriet Hageman, representative from Wyoming. She's in D.C. One of the things that I noticed, you said you reintroduced the No Net Gains in Federal Lands Act, or Pastures Act. Why is this important? Why did you reintroduce it? What do you think is going to happen? Give us an update.
Well, these are two different bills, and one of them is that the federal footprint in Wyoming is already too big. We do not need the federal government to be buying more land in Wyoming. So all the no net gain bill does is that to the extent that the federal government wants to come into Wyoming and purchase land, such as the Kelly parcel, or lands from private landowners or the state of Wyoming, to the extent that the federal government wants to gain more acreage in Wyoming or additional acreage, they're going to have to give up acreage or the value of those lands somewhere else in the state. All it is to make sure that we are not further expanding the federal footprint throughout the entire country. The federal government already owns 640 million acres. They do a terrible job of managing a lot of that. That's why you see the catastrophic forest fires that you do, such as in this past summer. The people who are on the ground in the Forest Service in Wyoming will tell you that part of the problem that we have with the fires, such as in the Bighorn Mountains, was because of the roadless rule that was adopted out of Washington, D.C. in 2001, and it's just devastated their ability to actually manage that very, very valuable resource. So I'm just saying the federal government should not be able to gain additional acreage. To the extent that they want land, they need to release land or the value of that land elsewhere within each individual state. The Pastures Act is also to get at the fact that the federal government always plays by different rules than the rest of us have to play by. And again, I don't think that was ever the intent of the founders. So what the Pastures Act does is, to the extent that, say, the Forest Service cancels somebody's grazing rights, when they do that, they force the landowners, the contiguous landowners, to fence out their property. Well, Wyoming is a fence-out state. So all I'm saying is, if you're going to cancel a grazing lease, it is the Forest Service or the BLM that must cover the cost of fencing those lands, not the individual landowners. So it again protects our private property right, our private property owners, our livestock producers against really bad decisions coming out of Washington, D.C.
Our guest is Harriet Hageman, representative, congresswoman from Wyoming, talking about, D.C. and overreaching. We know that the Biden administration was really against fossil fuels and tried to stranglehold it, strangle it out of existence, really. What is changing with the Trump administration? Are we going to start seeing more drilling? Are we going to see more maybe prospecting of oil and gas here in Wyoming and other places? What are you hearing? What are you seeing in D.C. about that?
It's one of the most important agenda items he has is to unleash domestic energy. The fact is that the Biden administration was not opposed to fossil fuels or oil and gas. They were opposed to domestic production of those resources. That's the bizarre part about it. We were importing. Under the first administration and Donald Trump, we were net exporters. Under Joe Biden, he started importing it. It's not that our use of these resources went down. It actually increased, but we imported more. Now, what were the consequences of that? Well, one terribly negative consequence is that Iran, by lifting the sanctions on Iran and purchasing their oil and gas, made $110 billion over the last 4 years in oil and gas sales around the world, whereas before, with the sanctions in place, they were going bankrupt. And we were very, very close to being able to topple that horrific regime in Iran and free the Iranian people from the tyranny that they have lived under since 1979. Biden's policies didn't stop us or decrease the amount of energy we were using. We actually increased it. It's just that we were importing it, and in the process, we were empowering dictators and despots around the world, Venezuela, Russia, Iran. What happened with Hamas? Iran has been able to fund Hezbollah and Hamas because of their oil and gas sales, because of the bad policies of the Biden and Harris administration. So I have introduced the Coal Act, which would require the Secretary of Interior to start issuing coal leases. I've done a similar bill with regard to oil and gas to force the Secretary of Interior to start issuing oil and gas leases. So the fact is that under this administration, as he says, we're going to drill, baby, drill, and we're going to mine, baby, mine. I see that our oil and gas and coal industries and uranium industries in Wyoming have a bright, bright future under this administration.
One of the things I've always said is, I don't mind renewable energy, but don't make it an if or then, or don't give me more choices. If you want wind and solar, fine, but give me the other choices as well. One of the things that has come up is nuclear power as well. What are your feelings about nuclear power? And we know that Bill Gates and I think his company is starting something down in Kemmerer. How does that fit into maybe Trump's policy and Wyoming's energy policy?
Well, I think it's one of the things that we have to look at, but it's at least reliable and potentially affordable, and in fact is affordable. Wyoming has one of the largest and highest quality uranium reserves in the United States. So I think it's absolutely a part of the portfolio that we are going to be using in the long distant future. And I think that Bill Gates' project in the Kemmerer area is evidence of that, and you're seeing that discussed actually in many places around the country. But we also have to have the base load, and that is again provided by number one, hydropower. power, yet they're taking out dams in the northwestern part of the United States because there are failed policies up there, and at coal-fired power plants and gas-fired power plants. All you have to do is look around at those states that have gone down this road of the green madness, and you can see the absolute disaster that we're all going to suffer through if we are forced into that kind of a paradigm. California, I was just reading this morning, California has spent literally trillions of dollars and will be spending trillions of dollars on their green energy ideas, if you want to call them that, and they will have absolutely no effect whatsoever on the very thing that they're trying to forestall, which is in their vernacular climate change. So they are taking money and they are misdirecting it and redirecting it from the things that they should be doing, such as providing fire services and infrastructure to be able to fight fires, and they are redirecting it to things that make no sense. A train to nowhere, for example. And by the way, when they do this, they don't want the windmills. They don't want the power lines. They force it on their neighbors. They force it on Wyoming and then demand that we provide them with a certain percentage of clean energy or they won't buy our energy from us. My response is turn them off and see how that goes.
Yeah,
but
right.
That's just, this is the hypocrisy and also the absolute nonsense that we have tolerated for the last several decades because of this climate change hysteria and scare that has been wrought by people who will stand to make massive amounts of money off of it. We are not decreasing our energy use. We are increasing our energy use every single day. Coal, oil and gas, uranium, all of that will have to be in the mix or we won't have the lights on.
Last question for Harriet Hageman, Congresswoman from Wyoming. Department of Education, Donald Trump may, I guess, shut it down or make it irrelevant. Why do you think he's doing that? Where do you stand on it? Where do you see it going?
I think we should abolish the Federal Department of Education. It only came into existence in 1980 with the stroke of a pen by Jimmy Carter. It has been a horrifically destructive agency. We spend hundreds of billions of dollars on the Federal Department of Education, yet our test scores have continuously fallen since it came into effect. The last test scores that came out are absolutely an abomination. Our third and eighth graders are not learning to read and they're not learning to do math. This is a national security issue. We cannot keep continuing to fund an agency that has failed in the way that the Department of Education has. It is an indoctrination agency. What it does is it demands all of these various things that our schools are required to do, but they aren't teaching the kids and the kids aren't learning. Our inner cities are an absolute wasteland in terms of education, and our Department of Education has done nothing about it. This is a state issue. I'm absolutely comfortable that the teachers in Wyoming and our administrators and our leaders in Wyoming are fully capable of standing up and supporting our education system and educating our kids. They do not need the Federal Department of Education in the middle of that. We do a phenomenal job. We have historically done a phenomenal job of educating our kids. The Department of Education should be abolished, and I actually have signed on to a bill to do that.
Representative Harriet Hageman, always good to have her on. Have a great day. We'll talk to you soon, and let us know when you're coming back to Park County, okay?
I will be there soon.
All right. Thank you so much. That's Representative Harriet Hageman from D.C. Always good to have her on.